It isn't challenging to describe what a liminal space is. It is, however, difficult to understand the feeling. Liminal spaces are based on the concept of liminality. The word liminal meaning the place in between or the threshold, the no longer and the not yet, the place that doesn't exist anymore and the place that never existed, being located somewhere in the confusing middle part. I believe I've made it evident that liminal spaces are a cornerstone of my channel, and something I would never abandon so long as I pursue YouTube. It is important to critique, criticize, or challenge the things you're passionate about or dedicated to. It should be pretty obvious that liminal spaces are definitely something I'm invested in. That being said, liminal spaces are a multifaceted concept which covers the liminal phenomenon through photography and artwork. However, many years after their initial popularity, it's apparent that the liminal space genre has unfortunately suffered from stagnation and repetition. There are about as many different kinds of liminal spaces as there are different styles of them, although in this case I'm directly referring to the subject matter of liminal space photography. What does the image at hand focus on? Is it of a pool? Maybe an old house with vintage-style interior decor? Perhaps it's a simple hallway of an elementary school. These photos, when presenting a stylistically unique setting or aesthetic, have a way of making us feel a certain way. Really, the same can be said when it comes to liminal space artworks. Fundamentally, art has the ability to capture a specific emotion. However, the method of examination is extremely important, as oftentimes, there may be a lack of variety within liminal spaces, and things get very samey very quickly. Let me explain what I mean. With the internet being so vast, many people want an easy-to-understand centralized experience for viewing content. That's why websites like YouTube and apps like Instagram are so popular. When it comes specifically to liminal spaces, for many people, that place is Reddit, with various liminal space subreddits and things adjacent to it. However, there lies a problem with viewing liminal spaces this way. This might sound strange, but I find that liminal space examination is best when you don't expect it. Liminal spaces are supposed to be an anomaly. They're these weird moments in time that we attempt to capture or document for a better understanding. If I actively seek out liminal space images, some of that charm is going to be lost along the way. Rather than, for example, doom scrolling at 3 a.m. and happening upon an image that looks reminiscent of times past, but you can't put your finger on it. If I'm looking at some specific channel or filter of liminal spaces, yeah, I might find some cool photos and artworks, but that feeling or essence I get when encountering something I didn't expect is going to hit a lot harder. Not to mention that the liminal space genre at this point in time is pretty saturated, but I'll get to that later. For now, I'd like to discuss something which, for some of the liminal space community, may seem controversial. We're all extremely familiar with this 4chan post, but if for some reason you're not, congratulations on getting to this point. So this is what we call the Backrooms. It displays an image of a liminal space. This is a 4chan post about a fictional monster called SCP-173. It displays a photograph of a sculpture. What do these posts have in common, besides possibly falling into the horror genre? These posts happen to spawn massive fan bases centered around wikis where one can create their own version of the post, ultimately leading to the creation of videos, artworks, and even video games based on their writings. SCP and the Backrooms are both extremely similar. Although I'm certain SCP, having been around for many years, could exist without the Backrooms, I don't believe the Backrooms would exist in its current state without SCP. It's clearly heavily inspired by or based on SCP's user-generated wiki formatting. While SCP has SCPs, categorizing different entities with various levels of danger, as well as the lore surrounding the laboratories, the Backrooms has levels, objects, and their own versions of entities, which they call entities. So why am I bringing all of this up? Well, you see, The levels part of the Backrooms categorizes, to put it plainly, liminal space anomalies. Now, you can say what you want about the quality of this categorization. The same can be said about SCP. Not every single entry on these wikis is going to be phenomenal. Yet I'm certain, due to their abundance, there definitely are some standouts. The fact of the matter is, people often associate liminal spaces with the Backrooms. The problem lies when people associate the Backrooms, specifically the lore-based wiki entry website, with liminality. Yes, levels in the Backrooms are liminal spaces. However, that does not make them liminal. By categorizing them and placing them within this complex lore of level systems, you're practically stripping them of their liminal essence. So to speak, liminal spaces are required to exist as a separate entity from the Backrooms, if they are to remain as liminal spaces. That being said, the Backrooms and its popularity definitely gave way to the popularity of liminal spaces. I don't think liminal spaces would be nearly as popular as they are without the Backrooms and its original post. It's just that they're different. And different is good. It does make me question, though, what the next ambiguous 4chan post will be that will end up spawning an entire internet fanbase. Maybe that post is already out there somewhere. In the meantime, I'd like to take us back a couple of years. Remember around 4 years ago, when most of the world was trapped inside due to a global pandemic? Of course you do. It was literally a traumatization of the entire planet. So everyone was stuck indoors, well, except for the people who didn't follow lockdown procedures, which, in America, was pretty common. Me personally, I did go out during the pandemic, not to restaurants, stores, or other businesses, but I was still, for the most part, out of the house. I'd walk or drive around the county to all of my favorite places, which usually would be populated with many people, yet I'd come to see that there wouldn't be anybody. Surprise, surprise, I know. However, being present in that moment was like no other. These places, normally so full of life and energy, completely devoid and empty, just felt wrong. I wasn't alone in this feeling either. The others who occasionally did go out would feel the same way. It felt like you were the protagonist to the beginning of a zombie apocalypse movie. Or in another case, this feeling was what it felt like to experience true liminality, a passing of time that simply didn't feel real. So what about the other side of the coin? What about the fact that the majority of people were all trapped inside for a long period of time, mandatorily stuck with their families, roommates, or whoever else? Well, what do most people do to pass the time when they're indoors? Go on the internet, of course. So with the surge of individuals trapped inside, and a minority of people posting pictures of their empty outings, it miraculously created the perfect storm, with everyone witnessing these photos of their favorite places in ways they've never seen them before. It created this specific feeling for many, a feeling of nostalgia. Nostalgia is a powerful emotion, and that's what it is. An emotion. So the pandemic artificially thrusted liminal spaces into the mainstream consciousness. At the same time, it also created a bunch of liminal spaces. Of course, liminal spaces have always been around, being that it's an abstract phenomena and whatnot, yet at this point, it was starting to emerge as this inescapable genre. Yes, it too existed as a genre before the pandemic, but I can confidently say that it was the pandemic which brought it into the spotlight. However, with popularity, especially on the internet, over time, it won't be. There are many reasons for this: people's attention spans, the fast-paced nature of the internet, the inevitable march of time and cultural changes, etc. For liminal spaces, it is definitely these reasons, but there's also something a little different. We know what liminal spaces are. We know where their popularity comes from, and we know why they're so popular. So why is it now that looking at a liminal space image just doesn't feel the same as when it did back then? Well, despite 2020 being over 4 years ago, liminal spaces at this point in time are oversaturated. I myself have made 36 different videos on the subject, not including my supplemental analysis series and any other similarly related content. There are many liminal space images. But why is that? Simply put, everyone is a liminal space photographer. Even people who don't know they're taking liminal space photos are liminal space photographers. You think Sarah Jane S. on TripAdvisor knew that in 5 years her photo was going to be stolen and posted on Reddit, leading to an investigation into the location and its discontinuation situation?
Yes.
In all seriousness, this fact kind of plays into what I was mentioning earlier about stumbling onto a liminal space rather than actively seeking them out, at least photo-wise. When I look at Timmy Knight 557's liminal space image of their favorite playground, I'm not going to be as moved as when I look at something more stylized and less frequent, like this parking garage with only a single light on. Now, at this point, I do realize I am falling more into the realm of subjectivity. Maybe this image speaks to someone more than this one does, and that's great. The point I'm trying to make is that repetition in one particular subject eventually leads to familiarity, desensitization, and indifference. Eventually, I'm not going to feel anything when looking at these images. The other day, I went to the movie theaters for the first time in what felt like forever. The movie theater I happen to go to is the one that's closest to me geographically, located in my local mall. Now, this isn't a story about the mall being dead or anything like that. Rather, it's usually fairly active, with many families, couples, and mall walkers enjoying the space. On that evening when I went, I even saw people all dressed up going to some type of formal event or party. The mall was closing early since it was a Sunday, and the movie started around 7:30 p.m. So when the movie was finished, the entire mall was closed. The stores all had their gates down, most of the lights were off, and the only people remaining were some of the store employees and curious teenagers. Despite often covering liminal spaces, this was the first time in a long while since I could remember where I actually experienced that feeling of liminality. This place I was familiar with, which a moments ago was so full of life all across the board, was now quiet, dark, and empty, giving me this unnatural feeling of uncertainty. And that's just the thing. We can look at liminal space images and admire the artistry behind them. I wouldn't exactly say there's good ones and there's bad ones, since really that's your subjective opinion. However, looking at a liminal space image will never truly recreate or simulate that feeling of liminality one can feel through their own personal experiences. So are we tired of liminal spaces? I wouldn't say so, because liminality is a feeling. Does the liminal space genre suffer from oversaturation and repetition? Absolutely. But that goes with anything popular on the internet. So if you're really sick of seeing liminal space images and just don't get that feeling from looking at them anymore, perhaps it's time to get off the internet for a little while and find some liminal spaces of your own. This has been Shookey, and as always, thank you for watching, and take care.